everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today for Hero Arts, and today I'm sharing how to use the new Hero Arts and Alta New partner stamp set called Bloom and Grow with Reactive Inks for an easy watercolored look. I'm going to take a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock and stamp the large floral and leaves from the Bloom and Grow set on my background. I'm going to concentrate the largest image in the upper left corner and have the leaves come out from each side. I'm also going to choose a sentiment from the stamp set to stamp at the same time. We're going to be stamping all of these images and greeting with the embossing and watermark ink. Once I have the images placed where I want them to go, I'm going to stamp them with the embossing and watermark ink. I'm going to prep my cardstock with a powder tool first to help keep the embossing powder only on the inked areas. Then we'll heat emboss the floral, the leaves, and the sentiment with white embossing powder. I stamped the images twice to make sure I had a really good impression. You definitely don't have to do this, but I did do that with this first stamped image to make sure. Once I have that stamped, I'm sprinkling on my white embossing powder. This is the Hero Arts Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. You can see that the floral is going to definitely be the focal point of this image. This is such a beautiful flower and can be colored in so many different ways. I thought it would be really fun today to share how I like to use Reactive Inks as a watercolor. They can be used in so many ways, and this is just one other way you can use them. I think it's great, especially if maybe you don't do a ton of watercoloring or aren't super experienced in watercoloring, which I definitely am not. It's a great, I kind of call it a cheater way to get a very similar look. I also very much love to do any kind of watercolor effect with an embossed outline. I find it's easiest for me to keep my images within that embossed outline area when I'm doing a watercolor technique, as the embossed line helps hold the color inside of that line. I am stamping my leaves, and anything that overlaps I'm wiping away with a paintbrush. I also could have masked my flower, but I was going for really quick and easy today and didn't take the time to mask it off. Once I have the powder wiped away from the areas I don't want to emboss, I'm going to heat set the leaves. Then I'm going to repeat this on the left side of my panel. This panel does measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. It's going to completely cover the front of an A2 sized card base. Once I had stamped my leaves, I decided I probably needed something else in the bottom part of the card. All along, I had planned on stamping the flower twice in some form or fashion. We're just going to stamp parts of that floral along the bottom edge to help fill that in and finish off our background design really beautifully. Again, anything that is overlapping the large floral is going to be wiped away with a dry paintbrush so that we don't have a funny line going over our large floral. I stamped the leaves twice because I felt like I needed some greenery in a couple of places to help balance out the card design. I didn't stamp that remaining floral until a little bit later. Often when creating a card, you might not always have all of the components in your mind exactly where you want them to go, and it's okay to come back and add those later. I started watercoloring the petals by laying down some lemon drop reactive ink, and then I'm going to just kind of gradually add in some creamsicle and fruit punch colors. I did this when it was all wet, these first few petals. However, it really works best if you lay down your color and let it dry, or dry it with a heat tool and then come back and add your next color and do your blending that way. I wisened up after the first few petals, and I went ahead and went in and added the lemon drop to the entire flower, dried it with a heat tool, and then went back in and added creamsicle and fruit punch until I got the color I wanted. I just tried to get the most smooth color that I could on each of the flower petals. I wasn't totally sure about this until it started to dry and until I got more color added to the flower, and then I absolutely loved it. What makes this card pop even more is once we add in the green for the leaves and then the blue for the background, it just makes this beautiful bright floral pop. I'm a huge fan of adding blue to the background for any kind of card that is stamped like this. Not always blue, other colors will work as well, but blue is one of my very favorites, especially a blue like the pool party that we'll be using. Now that I have added in my color, that yellow lemon drop color, you can see I'm going back in and adding fruit punch and creamsicle until I get all of those petals colored just so. The detail on this large bloom is absolutely stunning and is so much fun. Here you can see me hitting this with a heat tool so that my results are much, much better from this point forward. I wanted to leave this in the video so that you could see how I came to coloring all of those petals. I have watercolored with the Reactive Inks before, but not quite in this way. And so it was kind of an experiment, as well as showing you how I used the Reactive Inks to watercolor. And I think it's important to share those little tips along the way so you can see how I came to this point. I did go in with and add quite a bit of fruit punch to these extra petals, and then I'm grabbing creamsicle and blending it all out. As I add more and more color to each of the petals, it really starts to come to life. Any of the smaller areas I tried to concentrate, or those small little petals, I added more fruit punch to those to just make them stand out a little bit more. The variation in color is what makes watercolored looks like this so beautiful. Once I have my flower done, I'm going to clean up my mat, and then I'm going to grab key lime fizz and green apple and color in those leaves. All of my leaves, the base coat is key lime fizz, which is the lighter green color. And then I'll go in and shade with a little green apple. I think it's really important to note that this gives you a really good idea of how the card looks against a white background at this point. And I think it's not near as showy against a white background as it is against a blue background. I also think like a dark gray background would also be really, really pretty here. It just is personal preference. If you want to keep a white background, I would recommend not stamping the sentiment until later and stamping it in a color, of course, so that it's easy to read. Here is where I went ahead and stamped another little bit of flower to fill in my background with a little more color. I'll emboss that with white embossing powder, color that in just like I did the large bloom that's in the upper left corner, and then I'm going to press Pool Party ink into my work surface and start watercoloring the background. I squeezed out quite a bit of water from my water brush pen into the Pool Party ink, and then I'm laying that color down around my floral. What's so awesome about this is it really starts making the flower come to life. I started with a little bit lighter application, and then I did go in and add a little bit more ink in certain areas to darken it up. Look how pretty this is once you get that color added. And I did purposely leave the water pooled in the loops in the word amazing because I like how that looks once it dries. It dries a little bit darker and it's just kind of a fun look. Once I have all of my ink added, I am going to let this completely air dry or hit it with a heat tool to speed up the drying process. Then I will attach this to a white top fold card base with a nice strong adhesive. Finally, I'm going to take some sequins and apply them throughout my card. I'm going to add them to my card with little dabs of liquid glue, layering some of the sequins here and there for added sparkle and glam. They're going to go from the upper right corner of the card down to the bottom left, with a few scattered up in the upper left and bottom right, just to balance it all out. I purposely picked Hero Art sequins that coordinate with the colors of my florals. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this card showcasing how to use Reactive Inks to watercolor the new Bloom and Grow florals from the Hero Arts and Altenew Partner Stamp Set. Please be sure to visit the Hero Arts blog for more information on this project. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.